Hello, America. Welcome back to landlordsjournal.com. Thanks for joining us again. This week we're going to be talking about interviewing a homeowner of a potential acquisition. Let's say that you have before this that you had put together a list of properties of interest, and you had sent out letters to the addresses, and now you're getting some responses. You may be surprised at how many responses such a thing can get. We had like a 30% response rate from a small mailing. Thank goodness we did a small mailing when we did this in our town. But okay, let's say you've sent out some letters, some properties that you want to that you're interested in buying, and these guys are going to call you, ring, ring, ring on the phone. What are you going to say when they call you back?
I think it's a good idea to already have together a list of your own questions, so that you don't, number one, forget something that's important, and number two, it makes you look more professional in a phone conversation if you are ready. If you have your stuff together. So I think it's important to know what questions to ask and be ready to ask those questions. You want your conversation to be short and sweet. Time is money. You don't want to spend 2 hours on the phone with somebody. I mean, that's not logical. That's not in your best interest.
The purpose of this call really is to put them at ease, isn't it?
Yes,
that
it is.
You are that you're a real person.
Yes.
That has sent that letter, and that you are interested in a business deal, but that at the same time you don't want to ask too much and get them uncomfortable.
Right.
That you want them to be able to follow through.
If somebody's
hang in there with you.
If somebody's interested in selling their home for whatever reason, there's going to be some emotion tied to that. So you could be poking at somebody with some very bad emotion. We found out. So sometimes you have to tread a little lightly in the very beginning until the person gets to know you, till you get to know the person. So one question that I am always interested in is, how much do you owe on the property? I think that's a big one. For our purposes, if there's a large mortgage on the home already, or if there's a large lien, secondary mortgage, that's not something that we feel comfortable taking on right now. We just don't think that we have to, because we have some other options, and we have run into that before. We'll talk about this in a little bit later, but we kind of work backwards with how much rent we need to make the property worth our time and worth purchasing. We had one a few years ago. The gentleman had a very large mortgage on this house that we were very interested in, but we just could not settle on a price, because if we took the mortgage, we could not have rented it enough to make a profit.
Yeah, the rent has to coincide with the capitalization rate. You
Exactly.
can't capitalize a property, $100,000 property, when you're only paying $600 or $700 market rent.
He had very low equity.
If the market won't support the capitalization, you have to be able to, if you can pay $100,000 for a property, but you want it to capitalize, and you need to be able to, one, pay the mortgage, two, have it capitalized in a sufficient amount of time, which is anywhere from, we like it to be 5 to 15 years. In your own home, it doesn't matter.
You need a comfort zone to plan for unforeseen problems. I mean, you always have to put in that cushion. This gentleman in particular, he had wanted $63,000 for this really nice rental, 2-unit rental. It was actually a duplex, but we worked it back, and there's no way we could have rented it in the area, and that's important. We could not have got the rent in the area that would have made it worth our time, and so we just could not agree on that. But looking at the numbers, if somebody did not work those numbers back, they may think, oh yeah, that's great, let me sign, this is a steal, and then toward the end they're going to get a nasty surprise.
I want to make an exception. There's the only exception to that is if you're in an area and we're not in that area, if you're in an area where there's where the appreciation, the property value is going to go up.
Yeah,
There's
I agree.
in our area, the property value is not going to go up. It's going to be insignificant. But however, there is an exception to what we're saying. If we're in and we'll go over this in more detail later. But there are exceptions to that.
I agree.
Right.
I just meant for this specific one on that street,
Right.
in that neighborhood, there was no appreciation.
Right.
And there won't be for a long time, if ever.
Right.
So you want to find out how much they owe on the property. And also these questions should get the gears turning in their head, too. You want them to start thinking about the property and why maybe it's a burden for them, why they want to get rid of it. And the more of a burden it is, that's going to help you out. The less they're going to be willing to take for the property to get rid of it. So start asking these types of questions to make them think. So how much do you own the property? And then talking about the second mortgages or the liens, they should know this information. We ask that question, but believe me, we will find the answer to that on our own. Trust me, you don't take their word for it,
No.
but ask them anyway and give them a chance to be honest and upfront.
Right.
And that says something about the business deal. I believe personally,
Right.
that's what I think.
You never buy a property without title insurance.
Do
or
your-
property
exactly.
insurance.
Do your due
That's a whole other
diligence
show,
on
too.
that. But let them give them the opportunity to be upfront with that. And then, are you the sole owner? I think that is important as well. And that may seem kind of like I don't know, why would you ask that question? Are you the sole owner? But Donnie, do you want to take that one? Tell them a little bit about the problems we ran into with a property.
That it is an important question and something that you can probably weed out front on the phone if it's a property that you're really going to be able to pursue, and if the person you're talking to, if they own the property and their divorced wife is the co-owner and she lives somewhere else, or it is actually the son and his mother owns the property, but there's also a daughter involved. There are.
It can be very
It
complicated.
can be very complicated,
Immensely,
and
we
you
have
may
seen
not
that.
be talking. You may not be talking to the decision maker,
Exactly.
or you may not. You may not be talking to somebody that can make any decision at all about the piece of
And
property.
we ran into that more than one occasion.
It might be one of the questions that we want to ask for the first interview. Are you the sole decision?
Well,
Are you the
that's-
decision maker? Period.
Are you the decision maker?
Are you a
Yeah.
decision
I think
maker?
that's actually a good
No.
way to phrase it.
Right.
That's a good way to phrase it.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
Maybe just
the
not
owner.
Are you a? Or then we ask them, well, if you are you one of many? Or
Do you remember, John, we looked at one house a few years ago that was an estate from a lady that had passed away. I think we looked at it with her daughter, but come to find out, each of her kids had a stake in the house.
right?
And so they would have had to sign all this documentation and agree.
Right.
And is it really worth your time and effort? I mean, if it's a steal, maybe, but what they
Which
wanted
we
for the
actually did
house-
purchase a set of houses with that same scenario, which we had to wait on our attorney to filter through all the estate things and get everybody on the same page whether they wanted to sell it or not.
And but we didn't know that up front.
We didn't know that up
We didn't know
front.
that.
We didn't know that until we actually got into it and got the attorney.
This other house, she told us up front.
She told us
We're
up front, right.
We're like, ooh, I don't know if that's such a good idea, because she's like, well, I don't know if my brother is ever gonna be willing to do this,
And that's the thing where
Okay.
we didn't get invested in it. Well, we got invested on this other one.
Yeah,
and
we were already
he didn't
invested.
tell us until we got invested in it that, well, there's two other sisters and a brother that had to agree on it. So that was kind of it was an estate basically. So maybe that's a question: is it an estate that owns it? Is it more than one person? And are you a primary decision maker? Or are you a decision maker?
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. And another question that you may have to figure out how to phrase on your own, but the concept is really what's important, is why did they respond to your inquiry? Why are they calling you back? Why are they interested in possibly selling the house to you? With a 30% response rate, 30% of those people were interested in what we were offering and the potential of what was there. 70% didn't. You know, they weren't interested, or if they even got the letter, which a lot of them didn't get the letter. But so what sets them apart? Why are they interested? Again, I think that goes back to the story behind the house. There's emotion behind that, which, gosh, I'd like to talk about that separately as far as a win-win situation. That's a whole other topic. But I think it's important to get into the psyche of the person a little bit to help you to determine how you're going to proceed with the deal.
Mm-hmm. I think that can be the first the beginning of the conversation, and that
Sure.
is that gets it an innocent icebreaker of, you know, thanks for answering my letter. Thanks for answering my letter. What made you decide? We sent out several letters, and what
That's a
made
good
you
way to
decide?
put
Yeah, what made you decide to answer a letter?
Right.
I think that's
we're interested in houses and getting houses, and what made you decide to answer our letter? And then they get to tell their story. Or at least they get to start telling their story of their house, and as that being the first question, then once you get that conversation going about the house, then you can lead the interview about, well, you know, is it now, how long have you had the house? Are you this, you know, is it do you just have the house yourself, or is somebody else part owner of the house too? You can build on that and get the information you need in a very comfortable way.
This sounds abrasive.
That
It's
doesn't
starting out
seem
with, why
like
do you
an
want to sell?
interrogate. Yeah,
Right,
it doesn't
right.
seem
It
like
should
an
be an
interrogation.
Right. It didn't sound.
You
It sounds
know,
more eloquent.
You know, is it does you are you guys in a place where you need to pay off a mortgage on this house? You know, are you all challenged with that, or do you is that?
And they will want to tell you.
You know,
they will want to tell their story. A lot of times, sometimes they think they've been done wrong, you know, or they have bad circumstances, and people, they want to share that. They want to tell you that. They want to talk about their problems. It helps. It's a little cathartic, you know, I think. And I would also advise strongly that you take notes. When they tell you something, you have a pad and pen there, you know, and you write down what they say, how they say it. You know, just like you're taking a medical case history for anybody that's out there that does that. But you write that down, because dollars to donuts, you're not going to remember exactly what they said and how they said it, and that could be important later on, you know.
Yeah, and you want to be able to take information back to your contractors, or you know, because a lot of times these places need work.
Or your business partners.
Or your
one
business
of,
partners,
one of us
right.
might field a phone call, and I have to report to them what that person said, and I want to make sure I have it right, because we base our decisions on the data, and I have to be right with what I say. So, you know, you record that, and don't necessarily trust your memory, no matter how good it is. You're going to want to look at that information later on. I think that's important.
there's some interesting things that you might get in the conversation that isn't so much about the dollars and cents, but it's more about their place as far as their motivation goes with the house. You know, how much of a burden the house may be to them, and such as asking them when was the last time you were over there to the house. You know, do you live there, or when's the last time that you were over there?
Right.
You know, what was it like? You know, and you can, you know, and they may say, well, I haven't been there in several months. You know, or they might say, I go every week and mow the yard, or it gets you some information about how much of a burden it is
Their
on
level of
them.
involvement.
Their level, how much, you know, what other things may be motivating them. You're assessing how motivated they are to sell this property.
How
When
much
you're
value?
asking those kind of questions.
You're assessing their value of the property in some degree. If they're there every week mowing and checking light bulbs and flushing the toilet or whatever, then they've invested a lot of time, and they think that they need something for that time.
Yeah, and these people are out-of-state owners.
Yeah,
I mean,
those are the ones that
we're
typically
narrowing it
have.
down to out-of-state owners. And one thing I want to add is we have found this from our previous campaign, is, and we need to be more careful about this, is a lot of times, not a lot, but there were several times when we solicited people that were under contract with a real estate agent, and we got calls. They were, nice about it to some extent. I just don't feel comfortable getting those calls because it feels like we're trying to undermine the real estate agent and waiting for their contract to expire. That feels like we're undermining them,
Right.
and it doesn't set well with them, and it puts everything in a bad light. So I would recommend before you even do the interview, when you mail out the postcards, make sure that maybe do a drive-by, maybe some way. And if you're doing 50, sometimes it's hard. If there's any way to look for the addresses on the MLS, make sure they're not for sale, or do an internet search or something, just to make sure you don't get those nasty calls.
I think you just ask them. That's a good point. But I think are you under contract right now?
Or maybe put it in your letter. We're sending these out. I'm assuming you're not under contract with a real estate agent. That way it lets them know in the beginning without having to go. Because if we're doing 50 mailings, none of us have the time to sit there and, unless we had some kind of automated way to do it to like the realtor.com or something. But put it in the letter to say, hey, just let them know we're not stepping on anyone's toes if someone does sneak through and they're under contract with a real estate agent, just so we don't get, a caller that's upset, or a real estate agent that says, hey,
Yeah. Just to give a little story, just to talk about when's the last time you were in the house, and also does anyone live there? That's important too, that you know about the upkeep on the property. If nobody's lived there in the past year and you live in a cold area of the country, you might have some burst pipes. You just don't know.
Oh, yeah.
That's a problem. But we had a letter from a very nice couple that lived out of state that came back for a reunion to our area. And they were interested in talking to us. And this home was previously owned by the lady's mother, who passed away. And the lady actually grew up there, so she was emotionally invested in the house. But they had rented it out, to a property manager. So for a while, they hadn't been in the house physically in a couple of years. They didn't know what to expect. So Donnie and I were physically with them when they walked in the house for the first time after 2 years. And it was an eye-opening experience for them. It was eye-opening for us to watch their reaction, because the place was a disaster. There had been squatters. It was in disarray. Nobody had kept up anything. On the inside, it was just a disaster. And Donnie and I immediately knew this is not something we can take, because rehab, it just would not work out. It was a kind of a depressed neighborhood. We could not get the rent. There's just no way. So we politely walked around, but it was very sad to me to see their reaction, and they were begging us to please, just whatever, take it from us. But even if they gave it to us, I wouldn't have
the
said
money that we would have sunk into
no way.
Probably.
But that made them very motivated. Is a point of my story there, and I just felt so. I always wonder what happened to that nice couple. They were just really shocked at what they saw in that property. I mean, they were squatters. I mean, it was a disaster.
If you do discover that it's a rental and it's occupied, John, what kind of questions would you be interested in knowing at that stage? If you've asked them if the property, if somebody lives there and they say, yeah, I rent it out, what might you want to ask them?
The first thing I would do is ask them how much their rent is, if there's any room for increase. I mean, a lot of times when we acquire property, we immediately increase the rent, see what kind of changes we can make to increase revenue, what kind of expenses we can reduce, to increase our margins. So that would be the first thing I could do. A lot of times they rent them for, or people that aren't in tune with the market, rent them for way below market. Similar to we have discovered that, and sometimes it's way above market. They want more than what we're willing to pay. And so all those things have to line up. Our equation has to equal to what our standards are. If their rent's $350 and they're asking $50,000 for it, and it's a single family home, and there's no, it's like a garage apartment or something, and there's no increase for rent. I mean, the numbers have to jive,
Yeah.
The numbers have to jive. So if they're on, a depressed area, and we know from experience that we're not going to get any more than $700 a month out of that place, and they want $50,000 and it needs work and blah blah blah, then those numbers don't jive. So the numbers have to jive. So the first thing I would do is ask them how much rent they're paying.
And I would also ask, how long has the rent been at that level? Because we have come across some where the owner says, well, sweet little Miss Smith downstairs, she's been in that apartment for 10 years and paying $350, and I've just let her keep it.
Right.
You know, well, if we take the property and we can get $550 instead of $350, I mean, it's business.
Right, exactly.
You know, she's going to have to make a decision to pay more rent or find other accommodation.
Right.
Another question that we personally realized is a good thing to ask if there are renters is if they're current on their rent.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
And if they're under lease, because if they're under lease, then we inherit them. If they're
Yes.
not, we can let them go.
Yeah. Because we bought a property that was a duplex, and one of the units was vacant, but it was being fixed up. The other we had asked it, you know, the other was occupied, and it was a renter, and we had asked how long they had been there, and they'd been there for a few years, and we left it at that. But we after the purchase we discovered, or at the signing we discovered
At the closing,
they were 18 months behind. Or
Yeah, they
something
never
like
hadn't
that.
paid in months, a year.
Yeah.
So
They were living there for free like squatters.
That was a dishonest.
It was.
That was dishonest. So
we had no
actually,
recourse at that point.
we probably could have said
have
something.
not.
I could have stopped the deal right then and there. Well, actually, I already signed the paperwork.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I already
It was
signed
a
it.
done
So I
deal.
actually signed it, and then by the
and
way,
our attorney okayed it, and so which is another thing.
So
I mean,
yeah, you have to. So yeah, don't take it. Yeah.
these are some of these questions you ask your attorney to.
Yeah,
just
you
to
have
double check.
Right. And if, just because there's a renter in there, you have to be very specific. Is the renter paying rent, and like you said, so.
So
Lesson
some
learned.
things. Okay, so just in recap, on a initial telephone contact, where you have sent out letters, and now potential sellers are calling you, or have responded to you, and you're going to call them. You want to keep that conversation comfortable, non-interrogative, casual, easy, but you do want to get some information that's valuable to you. You want to find out what their interest was in responding to your letter. You want to know if they're the sole owner of the property, and what is owed on the property, and if there are any second liens or any complications like that, as far as what's owed on the property. And you want to get a feel as to when the last time was they were there, and who, if anybody, lives there, and if somebody does live there, what the details of that relationship is, or how much are they renting it, how much are they renting it for, and if the rent is current. And that's enough, I think, for getting the conversation started with somebody, and then you're probably going to then what you're going to want to end up with the conversation is to set a date for a site visit with them at the property. You'd like to, and then you can meet your potential seller face to face at the property, and that's what our next talk is going to be about. So tune in again next time, America. Thanks for watching LandlordsJournal.com.
Bye.